Chapter 4. The Miracle of Love. Encounter with Mother Teresa and the Missionaries of Charity. Opening quotes. Let us not use religion to divide us. In all the holy books, we see how God calls us to love. If I ever become a saint, I will surely be one of darkness. I will continually be absent from heaven to light the light of those in darkness on earth. Mother Teresa. My complicated journey to Mother Teresa's simple path. The miracle of love is this. Simply loving people changes the world. For love has the power to heal our inner and outer divides. As Mother Teresa said, every act of love is a work of peace, no matter how small. In 2016, I traveled back to Italy for the first time since my missionary work. I was one of 120,000 people to attend the canonization of Mother Teresa in St. Peter's Square in Rome. Her works of love have touched millions of people worldwide from all religions and no religion. Of the many people I've met in 30 years of traveling the path of Mother Teresa's mission, here are 3 examples of her impact, which is universal. I met a Hindu man in India who opened up his wallet to show me a picture of Mother Teresa. It was larger than the photos of his own children. And he told me, I respect Mother Teresa more than any other person. I also met a Buddhist nun and scholar at a conference. She ended her study of Mother Teresa's life by wondering if Mother Teresa might well have been a bodhisattva who chose to manifest in Christian form to reach the greatest number of people with her compassion. And I also have met an avowedly non-religious college student. After our study of Mother Teresa in a college class, he said, I've never encountered a love this pure. In the Gospel of John in the Bible, it says, love one another as I have loved you. And this is the commandment of Jesus that's engraved on the tomb of Mother Teresa at the Mother House of the Missionaries of Charity in Calcutta, India. I went there in 2013. I had written a request to interview with Mother Teresa's successor, but I was told that the Missionaries of Charity do not talk about their work. They say, come and see. And so I did. Calcutta, I went there. This is where her work was started. Tijuana, I also went there. This is the home to the Mother Teresa of Calcutta Center. And Rome, I went there for the canonization and the Missionaries of Charity convent and their home for the poor. And I also went to the convent in San Francisco, which is the novitiate site for sisters in the Americas. I have been to places where Mother Teresa walked and where she served. I've met people who worked with her. And I've also witnessed for 2 decades the impact of what she called her simple path on the lives of hundreds of college students. They put her teachings into practice in community service sites worldwide. The first-hand accounts from all of these sources, together with Mother Teresa's own words, are the basis for this chapter. At 22, I was a fundamentalist missionary in Italy. And I viewed Mother Teresa as an apostate because she was not a member of my Christian sect. 10 years later, I was 32, a proud holder of an Ivy League PhD. And then I dismissed her works of love as irrelevant to the struggles of women and other oppressed groups. At that time, I was an agnostic scholar activist. I judged Mother Teresa's views on women and family life. I thought, oh, so behind the times. My thinking was political and critical. What good is it to love the poor while they're dying? We must uproot the systems of injustice. But Mother Teresa focused her compassion on the immediate hunger, the homeless, the diseased, the loneliness of people right in front of her. She told us, love is for today. Programs are for the future. Somebody is thirsty for water today, hungry for food today. Tomorrow we will not have them if we don't feed them today. Mother Teresa did not judge the activists and the academics that criticized her. She encouraged them to do the work they felt called to do. She said, you can do what I can't do. I can do what you can't do. Together, we can do something beautiful for God. And she was right. I never came across a single critic of hers who wanted to do as she did. Touch and commune with lepers, clean latrines, go into war zones to retrieve crippled children of another belief system, serve the sick and dying for 50 years, smilingly around the clock with no vacation. When I was 39, a spiritual teacher opened my heart and set me on a path of love. My criticism of saints melted into humble aspiration. The time I spent in Calcutta then left me with this very sobering fact. I was incapable of her level of love, not even for a day. Though I wasn't Catholic, Mother Teresa became a patron saint of my path. I didn't have to agree on points of doctrine to take her as a guide in the way of loving. I learned recently that Mother Teresa blessed the book, Power versus Force, that brought me to my teacher. In 1991, she wrote him, saying, continue to use your beautiful gift of writing to the full, so that people may read the good news and glorify God the Father. His book was published in 1995. It has sold over 1 million copies, been translated into over 25 languages. People of all religions and no religions say that it helps them experience the healing power of love. In Mother Teresa's letter, she told him, spread joy, love, and compassion through what you write. The fruit of these three is peace, as you know. It's the peace that comes from loving and caring and respecting every person as a child of God, as my brother, my sister. My teacher wasn't Catholic. Yet perhaps Mother Teresa's blessing of his book, Power versus Force, helped to carry it into the world and into the hands of people who, like me, were looking for love. In his and her own way, each of them was light upon light to this seeker struggling to find her way out of the darkness of dogma and despair. Rome, witnessing sainthood. When I went to Rome for the canonization, I carried a court-certified relic of Mother Teresa. It was a tiny piece of her hair. I wanted to give it to the Missionaries of Charity. I figured it belonged to them. In Catholic tradition, this was a first-order relic, and it wasn't easy to part with. But Mother Teresa taught us to love until it hurts, and I was willing. I heard this teaching from many people who knew her, including a Hindu lawyer in Calcutta. He told me that after Mother Teresa touched and healed his sister of an oozing ear infection, he asked her about giving his spare money to the poor. And Mother Teresa told him, "Don't give spare money to the poor. Share with the poor. Give with compassion, not pity. Love until it hurts." Well, it hurt to give this relic away. To donate money was much easier. For years, I'd slept with this piece of her hair near my bedside. It brought me comfort and peace. The relic was given to me by a dear friend who knew of my devotion to Mother Teresa's path of love. I felt blessed and favored to have it. In many religions, the relics of saints and mystics are said to transmit a healing benefit to devotees. A priest that traveled with Catholic relics told me, "God is the cause of healing. Relics are the means." And then he told me of several healings that had occurred as a result of the relic exhibit that he traveled with. Now, as an academic, I was dubious of devotees' claims that special effects emanated from human remains. That is, until I met Dr. Willem Tiller, physicist and Stanford University professor. He found that the relics of spiritual masters, when activated by our human intention, actually alter the thermodynamics of the spaces they're in, and they have a healing influence on material objects in the room, including the human body. The authentic relics of genuine masters are more than mere ash. They radiate the healing power of love. On my first day in Rome, I took that Mother Teresa relic to the Missionaries of Charity convent where I was scheduled to see Sister C. Sister C is the nun who invited me to the canonization. She didn't want us to use her name in the book, so I refer to her as Sister C. I had met her 2 years earlier in California through an odd synchronicity. A friend of mine who spoke Hindi happened to spot a blue and white sari in our local drugstore parking lot. Knowing of my interest in Mother Teresa, my friend got this nun's phone number, and then I called it. Sister C ended up opening many doors for me. She grew up in India. She was called to the order at age 18 and then trained under Mother Teresa in Calcutta. Whenever she spoke of Mother Teresa, all who listened felt that energy field of joy and unconditional love. Sister C told us that Mother Teresa's main teaching was the gospel on 5 fingers. You did it to me. Whatever they do for the poor, the sick, the prisoner, dying, or leper, they do it to Jesus. This was the verse from the Gospel of Matthew in the Bible. Whatever you have done to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you have done it to me. This is Jesus Christ saying this. And so Mother taught this gospel teaching on her 5 fingers. You did it to me. And she told her nuns, quote, "Truly, every person we see is God. So whatever we do to that person, we have done it to God. End of quote. Mother Teresa taught Sister C to have, quote, total understanding love and never to judge drug addicts or the poor or those dying of AIDS, for they needed and deserved to be loved and to die in dignity. The greatest disease, Mother Teresa often said, was not leprosy, but loneliness. Feeling unwanted, feeling uncared for, feeling shunned. When Mother Teresa repeated the words of Jesus from Matthew's Gospel, I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was homeless, and you took me in. Mother Teresa was quick to add these statements. Hungry not only for bread, but hungry for love. Naked not only for clothing, but naked of human dignity and respect. Homeless not only for want of a home of bricks, but homeless because of rejection. When my friends and I arrived at the convent in Rome, everything was quiet. I wasn't sure where to find Sister C. We walked around the garden path, wandered into the church courtyard, looked up and down the sidewalks. No one was in sight. Then I caught sight of a small open door hidden behind some bushes. I walked over and peeked inside. The sisters were kneeling on the bare stone floor, praying in front of a crucifix marked with the words, I thirst. The words of Jesus at his crucifixion. And they say that Jesus thirsts for the love of souls. And the sisters are the carriers of that love. Every day, they have 4 hours of prayer, including meditation on the Word of God. They have Holy Mass, where they receive the Eucharist, and a holy hour where they adore Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. So their lives are woven with the Eucharist, and this is the fuel for their work. When I ask the sisters, well, now, how do you have the energy for this work you do? They told me, prayer. And they explained that Mother Teresa at first didn't think they could take time away from serving the poor to do their daily hour of adoration with the Blessed Sacrament. But in 1973, their society made the unanimous decision to have the adoration every day, since it infused their work with the presence of God and the love of Jesus in the poor that they serve. They explained to me that without these hours of prayer and the Eucharist, which is the presence of Jesus Christ, they said it's just ourselves we give to the poor, not God. So I peeked in the room and saw that they were in prayer. And we sat in the garden and waited for Sister C. And sure enough, she emerged smiling from her prayer room. Though she and the other sisters had been up since 4:40 a.m., this is how they begin every day in their prayer, early in the morning. They greeted us joyously as old friends. Sister C apologized for the long wait, and she made a jolly joke about how busy they had been in the last few days getting ready for the influx of canonization visitors. She said, at this point, it might be easier for you to meet the President of Italy than this little sister from the Mother Teresa Center. The sisters were, I'm sure, exhausted from recent events. Not only did they have the usual daily work of caring for the residents in their home for the poor, this is next to the convent. And then just a few days prior, when the Missionaries of Charity in Rome were flooded with people and plans for the canonization, a huge earthquake hit a nearby town, and the sisters went to care for those who were injured and homeless from the earthquake. They even gave them the tents that had been set up on their convent grounds for the upcoming canonization. The victims from the earthquake needed the tents now. The canonization was still a few days away. These sisters had been trained by Mother Teresa to ask for nothing and to trust in the providence of God. So they told me, quote, "We're sure the Lord will provide something for us and take care of this." And so they gave the tents to the earthquake victims. The sisters are taught to focus on the needs of the moment and to give whatever they can to others, not worry for their own welfare. As per Mother Teresa's instruction, they do not fundraise or ask for things. Rather, they wait for others to give freely in spontaneous collaboration. When Mother Teresa was asked about the future of her order or her material needs, she said simply that it was God's concern and God would provide. Now, those close to her knew she was a talented organizer who cut through the thickness of government bureaucracies. She spoke multiple languages without a script in her efforts to procure resources needed for her mission. Nonetheless, her focus was always riveted on the present, not planning for the future. The sisters told us that she taught them to view her work with the poor as a gift. She said, "We have an opportunity to be 24 hours a day with Jesus. And thus they love whomever is in front of them as if it were Jesus himself." Despite their workload, which is very heavy, every day, around the clock, the sisters were serene and smiling as they took us around the convent. There was a historic church and the home for the poor that they work in. They told us that Mother Teresa taught them to be full of joy and cheerfulness and to smile when in the presence of others, especially the poor and those who suffer. Mother Teresa taught them to always make sure that people left feeling happier and better than when they came. Those who suffer need to be loved. Their load should be lightened. Smiling with them eases their pain. One time in Calcutta, the sisters told me, there was a nun who was long-faced, and Mother Teresa told her, "Go to bed for the day. The poor already have so many troubles, they do not need to see yours." At the convent in Rome, smiles and humor flowed easily. In the midst of explaining how to arrive early to the events and avoid the pushing and shoving of pilgrims into St. Peter's Square for the canonization, the sisters started to laugh at themselves. They said, "Mother must be laughing at all of this. Here we're making such a huge fuss over her being canonized. We just pray there will be no stampede of pilgrims." Smiling and laughing, they took us through a gate into the monastery hallway to Mother Teresa's room, where she had slept. It was nothing special. Yet, wasn't it? In outer appearance, it was so simple. Yet, there was something about this very fact that made it stand out. Here she had been a Nobel Prize winner, honored with over 700 awards during her life. She was the founder and for 5 decades the superior of a pioneering religious order called Missionaries of Charity. It had outposts on every continent. She was a world leader in terms of the human spirit. Presidents, prime ministers, kings, and queens requested to meet with her. Even Princess Diana of Wales first met her here in Rome, having flown in for that specific purpose. Mother Teresa was on magazine covers around the globe, bestowed an honorary degree of divinity for the University of Cambridge. She endured daily visitors prostrating to touch her feet. And this tiny little room is where she slept. A cot with a single mattress so thin it could hardly be called a mattress. Mother Teresa's room in Rome looked the same as her room in Calcutta, which is at the Mother House in India that I had visited a few years earlier. Though both places are very hot and humid, she used no fan because, she said, the poor she served had no fan. Her calling was to live among the poorest of the poor, to eat what they ate, sleep as they slept, labor as they labored. This set her work apart from other religious and civic outreach programs to the poor. She and her missionaries of charity lived with the poor, without carpet or washing machine or dishwasher or entertainment or television. They had nothing to call their own. When convents and other buildings were donated to the Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa stripped them of all of those common comforts. And here I can share a story from Bradley James. He's the musician that Mother Teresa chose to put her prayers to music, which she did in a beautiful album called Gift of Love. And she designated him to create hymns for the Missionaries of Charity to be sung worldwide. Here's his firsthand account of Mother Teresa's renovation, as he called it, of a convent that was donated to them, making it into a Missionaries of Charity house. Here's what Bradley said. It was a convent where nuns had lived for many years, so you can imagine the condition inside was immaculate. But we got in there and Mother Teresa put us all to work by taking everything out. The beds, the chairs, refrigerator, dishwasher, water heater, garbage disposal, all the carpet, all the curtains. And I kept saying to Mother Teresa, aren't you going to need this stuff? And she said, God will provide. And I was thinking to myself, but God already provided what's in the house. Why are we taking it out? It was hard work tearing all of this stuff out. I didn't understand their vow of poverty. I was watching Mother Teresa, and she did not ask anyone to do anything that she herself didn't do first. So after a week, that house, that convent, was completely empty. We got Mother Teresa to the airport, and she had 2 cardboard boxes wrapped in twine. That was her luggage in many months of travel. She blessed all of the sisters and the people gathered around at the airport. And then she came over to me and said to me, Bradley, they are your sisters. You are their brother, and God is your father. I wondered to myself, what does that mean? I took the 4 sisters in my little car back to the convent where there had been crowds of people, and now there was nobody. And I said, where did everybody go? And the sisters told me, oh, they only come to see Mother Teresa. And I said, well, who's going to take care of you? Because I knew there was nothing in that house anymore, and they didn't have a car. And the sisters told me, God will provide. And as I drove away, I was horrified by the reality that they had taken this extreme vow of poverty. Bradley ended up visiting the sisters often, and he volunteered his time to help them in their service. He continued to be shocked at their level of surrender when it came to the vow of poverty. He told of one night when he delivered a large spread of leftover food from a lush dinner party he'd attended at the home of a wealthy friend in Beverly Hills. It was in the middle of the night and a dangerous drive into South Central LA where the nuns lived in that convent. But he went anyway. He was surprised to see the lights on, so he asked them, "Sisters, did something happen here tonight?" They said, "Oh, no, brother. We were in the chapel tonight praying for those who are hungry because we haven't eaten in 3 days." And here's what he told me. As that sister said this, I looked over her shoulder and saw a crucifix on the wall, and I remembered what Mother Teresa had said to me. "Bradley, they are your sisters. You are their brother, and God is your Father." And then I knew what Jesus meant when he said, "I was hungry, and you gave me bread." That's a very real statement. Hungry means that person right in front of you who is hungry, who is thirsty, who is alone, who is forgotten. And we don't have to go anywhere except where we are. If we look, we see them. And not long after that, I was in the house scrubbing the floor with the sisters, and I heard Mother Teresa coming. I stood up to greet her, and she got really close to me, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Bradley, now you understand." To voluntarily give up all material comforts and security to serve total strangers rejected by society. This is what Mother Teresa did. And as I stood in her room there in Rome, I wept at the purity of this depth of love. Her life was her message, even down to the bed she slept in. Rarely had I been in someone's home and seen with my own eyes such a total concordance of their stated ideal and their actual living. No wonder she told people, "Come and see." I mean, who among us can say this so freely? Who is happy for strangers to visit our workplace, not to mention our bedroom, and behold our integrity or lack of it? Yes, I was aware that her critics said she was unrelenting, that she was out of sync with the times, perhaps too strict with her nuns. But it seemed obvious to me and to most of the world that she emanated a purity of love that's rare on the planet. The sisters told us that Mother Teresa always did the most unpleasant tasks herself, cleaning toilets and latrines, wiping the maggots from sick bodies in the streets, and stroking the lepers. Her humility was spotless. She refused all credit and accolades for the work, saying, quote, "I'm only a pencil in God's hand." She accepted the Nobel Peace Prize because it put attention on the suffering of the poor, and she received it in the name of all those who are hungry, naked, poor, lonely, and uncared for. She spoke to that august assembly in her usual manner, straight from the heart, without notes, And at the end of her Nobel Peace Prize speech, she surprised the audience with her request that they join her in the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. And at her insistence, the banquet that usually accompanied the Nobel Peace Prize event was canceled, and all the funds were given to the poor. The $7,000 budgeted to feed 135 people at the Nobel Peace Prize banquet fed 400 people for a year. Sister C took us into the San Gregorio Church. This was originally an old family home belonging to Pope Gregory and then turned into a monastery 1,400 years ago. While we were waiting for Sister C, we walked around the courtyard, but we had no idea how majestic it was on the inside. In the courtyard outside, it looked old and tattered. But then when she took us inside, oh, magnificent. And this is not so different from Mother Teresa's teaching about human beings. No matter how wretched our outer condition, she saw the goodness of the inner being, as she called it, Christ in his distressing disguise. The sisters took us into their home for the poor. My friend remarked as we left, "This is the most meaningful part of our entire trip to Rome, much grander than the Sistine Chapel and the Vatican Museum." Our tour of the Vatican that morning had been wall-to-wall people pushing each other to see the historic treasures on display. But here, in the home for the poor at the Missionaries of Charity convent, we felt an environment of open-hearted ease, the love of Christ in action. There was no display of ancient treasures, but it was a haven of loving. The serenity at the home for the poor is what amazed us. And this peace I attribute to the power of love that motivates the sisters' endeavors. There was not a single person or object or attitude that was unpeaceful. Nothing was rigid, yet everything was in order. It was a mini global village. The Missionary of Charity nuns who worked there were from Kenya, India, Europe, and the U.S. The male residents who lived at the home for the poor were immigrants from Bangladesh, China, Algeria, Peru. They had come to Europe to work and ended up on the streets. One young man was dying of cancer, another was severely crippled, and several were elderly. They had no family to take them in. This home was their family. And to be clear, it was a home, not a shelter. It could have been chaos with a group of men accustomed to surviving on the streets. In several decades of volunteering at small and large shelters for the homeless, at rescue missions in LA at Skid Row, I had often seen chaos. I had seen security guards and scenes of aggression. I had smelled the stench of urine, taken in the trash on the floor, and then watched impatient staff or volunteers bossing the poor around like they were lesser people. In contrast, here in Rome, at the Home for the Poor, there were 65 men off the streets, watched over by only 4 nuns, and everything was spotlessly clean, calm, and friendly. The residents are touched with compassion and treated with dignity. I saw a large poster of Mother Teresa in the hallway, and it set the tone. It said, "The greatest problem is indifference." Nearly all of society is indifferent to the poorest of the poor. But Mother Teresa and her sisters see Jesus Christ in them. Mother Teresa explained to her sisters that there was a calling different from the other religious orders. She told them, quote, "We must be living holocausts, for the world needs us as such. For by giving the little that we possess, we give all. And there's no limit to the love that prompts us to give." Pope Francis, in his homily at the canonization, praised Mother Teresa for her mission to the urban and existential peripheries. He praised her as a tireless worker of mercy who helps us to increasingly understand that our only criterion for action is gratuitous love, free from the ideology, free from obligations, offered freely to everyone without distinction of language, culture, race, or religion. Mother Teresa's life was devoted to the work of universal love for all people, no matter their race, religion, background, or condition. She told us, quote, "Each person is a child of God, created to love and to be loved. All of us have been created by the same loving hand, and we belong to the same loving family." End of quote. "No one is here in the world just to be a number," she told her sisters. "We are here for the greater purpose of loving and serving, giving joy and compassion." Mother Teresa and her Missionaries of Charity are singular in their vows to love and live among the poorest of the poor, and to bring to them this unconditional love through wholehearted and free service. In 2018, I was blessed to attend the profession of vows for novices at St. Paul's Catholic Church in San Francisco. These novices were entering the Missionary of Charity service. They offered their lives as a living sacrifice of love. Their final hymn was a prayer to become the silent bread of the sacrament. Here's the line they sang: "Transform me into yourself, that I be bread like you. Bless me and break me. Give me to my thirsting brothers." In St. Peter's Square, during the canonization, we heard this amazing testimony from a nun who served in Yemen. It reveals their selfless service. Yemen is rampant with starvation and trauma in the wake of a civil war fueled by Shia-Sunni Muslim tensions, and many terrorist factions target Christians, among others. The Missionaries of Charity went there in 1973 and are among a few thousand Christians in the Muslim state of 27 million people. Here's what Sister Sally told us in her speech in St. Peter's Square. Mother Teresa lived in total dependence on God for her own needs and for those of the poor and their health care. We sisters pray daily. To know the designs of divine providence, we resign ourselves entirely to God's will. On March 25th in 2015 in Yemen, the surrounding community was attacked by terrorists in the midst of a civil war. There was shooting and bombing everywhere. We had 64 residents, 14 helpers, and 5 sisters. We had no food. We found ourselves in an utterly helpless situation. 5 days later, on March 30th, at 7:30 p.m., we had no electricity. It became pitch dark. And then there was a knock at the door. All of us ran to the door in fear and anxiety. The good news was announced to us. Someone had brought fruits and vegetables. But then the situation became worse. It became very difficult for us. Gas and diesel, water, all no longer available. We cut down some of the trees just for firewood. We baked the last flour. Our helpers asked for 1 loaf of bread to share with their families, so we emptied what we had and we shared it with them. The next day, 5:30 a.m., there was a knock. A man brought fresh bread, just enough for everybody. For 10 days, he never failed to bring the bread. On the 10th day, he brought also flour and wheat. In the midst of this dangerous situation, our dear Sister Prema, the Missionary of Charity General Superior, she called us from Calcutta and she spoke to us individually, each one of us. She gave us a choice. Do we remain or leave? All of us had only one answer. We choose to stay. We will live or die with our poor. That afternoon, a man brought the very medicines that were needed by our poor. But then we had only 1 tank of water left, and our neighbors and other people came with their empty bottles asking for drinking water. With the scourging heat and dangerous situation, how can we deny drinking water to a thirsty person or a thirsty family? And so we gave even down to the last drop. We remembered our dearest Mother Teresa's words when she said, "Thirst is not just for water, but also for understanding love, justice, and peace." And then again, the providence of God. A truck loaded with bottles of water arrived at our compound. We were filled to the brim with water and gratitude to God. A year later, Sister Sally, in Yemen, witnessed a most horrific massacre of her Missionary of Charity sisters and the 12 other people at this care home for impoverished elderly. On March 4th, 2016, in mid-morning, gunmen entered and shot, execution style. Sister Sally survived by hiding behind a door. She concluded her story in St. Peter's Square to us by saying, "With our hearts filled with greater love and enthusiasm, we beg God to continue using our nothingness to make the Church present in the world of today through the mission invested to us by our Mother Teresa." And the Archbishop said that Sister Sally begs to go back and serve in Yemen again, despite having witnessed a most horrific massacre of her sisters. Loving the lonely and unwanted, the poorest of the poor. Now, what is the origin of this mission, so selfless that it defies comprehension? It first appeared to 36-year-old Sister Teresa on a train to Darjeeling for her annual retreat. It was September 10th, 1946. This is the day referred to as Inspiration Day. Teresa had been a nun for almost 20 years. working mainly as a teacher of well-to-do girls in the convent's school. On that train ride to Darjeeling, Jesus gave her a call within a call. During the following months, through interior locutions and visions, Jesus revealed to her his pain at the neglect of the poor, and he told her he wanted her to dress in simple clothes and go out and radiate his love among them. He told her, "My little one, come, carry me into the holes of the poor. Come, be my light." Sister Teresa didn't reveal the mystical nature of her inspiration. This came to light only after her death in private letters. Still, those who knew her noticed a profound change as this call within a call became the driving force for the rest of her life. It took 2 years of persistent request to convince the church hierarchy to let her leave the relative comfort and safety of the Loreto Sisters Convent and go into the slums of Calcutta by herself. Outside their convent walls, there was violence among Muslim and Hindus. It was wrecking the streets, and there were refugees spilling into Calcutta. Starvation and disease were rampant. How could one woman do anything to address the suffering of impoverished millions? Well, she began one person at a time. In December 1948, she went for the first time to the slums, dressed in a plain white sari with a blue border and carrying the rosary. Her first act of charity was to pick up a man, starved and covered with worms, abandoned and dying alone in the streets. She cared for him as if he were Jesus. When he asked her why she was taking care of him, she said, "Because I love you." And then she nursed a woman dying of starvation and tuberculosis. And then she cleaned the wounds of a child. This was her method, to care for the poorest of the poor, one at a time. She said, quote, "I believe in person-to-person contact. Every person is Christ for me. And since there is only one Jesus, the person I am meeting is the one person in the world at that moment." Her ministry to the dying poor grew quickly. In 1952, she rented a former pilgrims' hostel at the Temple for Kali, and this hospice home came to be called Nirmal Hriday, Home of Pure Heart. When I went to the Kalighat neighborhood of Calcutta, where she started her work, I was overwhelmed by the poverty. There was garbage piled in public areas. There were beggars with various physical deformities that lined the sidewalks. Mothers with nearly naked children sat on the ground, eating rice. At Nirmal Hriday, 3 people with legs as thin as broomsticks lay on the steps, looking nearly dead. I was told that the destitute arrive at the home's entrance. They're eaten by maggots, they're incontinent, they're starving, and often infected with gangrene. I thought to myself, only a saint could see Jesus Christ in these suffering beings. One of the patients told Mother Teresa early in her mission that he felt like he'd lived as an animal on the street, but in her arms, in that hospice, he would die like an angel, totally loved and cared for. And this reminded me of what many spiritual traditions teach, that to die in a state of love sanctifies our entire life, no matter how wretched it has been. The Home for the Dying Poor was a great public service to the city of Calcutta, but initially it caused an uproar among Hindu leaders. They threatened to kill Mother Teresa for violating their caste system. They were appalled that the elite-born Indian women who had joined her Missionaries of Charity order were touching the bodies of the dying. Cleaning latrines and tending to dead bodies was deemed unclean. It was relegated to the lowest caste. Even in our own time, disregard for caste rules can lead to shunning and even killing family members. But Mother Teresa was like Gandhi before her. They both openly loved the class of people called untouchables, as if they were near and dear to God Himself. One volunteer who witnessed her bedside manner at Nirmal Hirday likened it to the way that priests handled the consecrated host at the altar. That is, they were both handling the presence of Jesus Christ, touching the body of Christ, Mother Teresa holding a dying body, and the priest holding the consecrated host. In 1950, the congregation called Missionaries of Charity received official recognition. This religious order is unique. It has an intense nature of service that became evident in 1957 when Mother Teresa began to care for the medical and emotional needs of society's most unwanted, the lepers. She wanted the lepers to know that they were loved as children of God. Her work began with a mobile medical dispensary, and then 2 years later, she opened the Leprosy Center in Titgare, providing medicine, surgery, communal support, and work projects such as weaving. In 1969, she opened a self-supporting community of lepers, named the City of Peace. The Pope's office provided funds to construct the City of Peace Leprosy Rehabilitation Center on land that was given by the government. The dry, desolate location was over 20 miles from the closest city, electricity, running water, and transportation. Nonetheless, within a few years, that village was home to 8 Missionaries of Charity sisters, 200 leprosy patients, and 70 children. This is an example of how the power of love can create something beautiful out of nothing. And here is one account from a layman who went with Mother Teresa to the leper communities. Here's what he told me. In the 1990s, while I was serving as a missionary in India, I spent time with Mother Teresa in Calcutta. We worked alongside her and various missionaries to reach out to the people that she referred to as the poorest of the poor. One morning during prayer time at the Mother House for the Missionaries of Charity, we prepared to visit a leper colony. And Mother Teresa addressed our fears of being with and touching those affected by leprosy. She reminded us of how much they needed our touch and love. And then she went further by saying to us, "The answer to all of your fears and their needs lies in the palm of your hand. 5 points on 5 fingers. Just let Him do it." That's what she told us. And I noticed at the chapel, located in a place set aside for the dying and destitute, including those with leprosy, I was so surprised to see walls covered by images and symbols of various gods and faiths. I understood from her that while she believed Jesus to be the door, she saw all faiths as leading to God, and that her task was simply to love. Any conversion would be an act of the Holy Spirit and not from her doing. I knew then that she was most committed to loving all. The love that God put in her heart transcended everything else. And indeed, love was the critical factor in Mother Teresa's ministry to the lepers. According to Father William Petrie, who spent 25 years with Mother Teresa in India, saying, "We were on the mobile clinic for Hansen's disease patients. Hansen's disease is leprosy. A week had been skipped because of the delayed arrival of the medical supplies, and Mother Teresa informed them of why. But one patient said to her, 'Well, you should have come anyway.' In other words, it was Mother Teresa's loving presence. It was just as significant as the medicine or food she might bring." Father Petrie called her presence a sacred presence, a charism of positive spiritual energy given from one to another in a spirit of love. Other folks called it darshan. Mother Teresa taught that any small act of love given to others, even a simple smile, increases and strengthens the presence of that loving energy and has a healing effect. Father Petrie wrote of an experiment he witnessed in which scientists found that people listening to Mother Teresa went into an alpha brainwave state, meaning they became calm, receptive, and relaxed. Bradley James, when he first met her, told me that he was moved to tears. He noted that her presence seemed very similar to his experience of the elevation of the host at Mass. He was a young dancer and singer in LA when he first heard she was in town, and he made it his mission to meet her. He called several times to the Missionaries of Charity house where Mother Teresa was staying, but they said she was unavailable. Finally, a priest told him to go to a certain church that evening. Bradley did go, and then he was taken into a room and told to wait. And wait. After a while, the door swung open, and in walked Mother Teresa. Here's what he said. Catholics would call it an aura or a presence. In India, Hindus call it darshan. It was so powerful that instantly I couldn't speak. Tears were coming down my face. She took her handkerchief, wiped my tears, and said to me, "Your tears are tears of love that you've never expressed." She took my hand and we went into the church. It was packed. And when the priest picked up the host for the elevation at the Mass, the energy I felt coming from her when she walked into that room was the exact same energy I felt when the priest elevated the host. It was the very same energy, Mother Teresa and the Mass. Bradley's description matches my own experience at Mother Teresa's tomb in Calcutta. As soon as I knelt at the foot of her tomb, I began to weep out of control. The tears came from the core of me, and not for any reason that I knew about. It was as if I'd come to a place of such vast love and inner safety that all of the longing of a lifetime poured out. As she told Bradley, "Your tears are tears of love that you've never expressed." Love is the greatest medicine. It heals our inner wounds, which are deeper than any physical wound. After establishing her ministries to the lepers, the dying, the elderly, and orphans, Mother Teresa spread her work beyond India. She established Missionaries of Charity houses in Venezuela and eventually to every continent. In 1971, she became a global sensation when Malcolm Muggeridge produced a documentary film about her work and published his book, Something Beautiful for God. She received countless awards, gold medals, honorary degrees. They all poured in. And Mother Teresa said they meant nothing to her except to give an opportunity to speak about the love of Jesus in the poorest of the poor. In 1979, her work was honored with the Nobel Peace Prize. And so, within 31 years from the beginning of her mission in 1948, her simple one-to-one method had miraculously reached millions. Her blue-bordered white sari had become a universal symbol of compassion. And this is the miracle of love. In 1997, when she died, the Missionaries of Charity were spread throughout the world on 7 continents, 4,000 members, 610 foundations in 123 countries, with over 1 million lay workers. The darkness, longing, and loneliness. Hidden from public view was Mother Teresa's interior service to the poor, and this was revealed only after her death. She suffered an existential darkness for nearly 50 years. It was unknown even to those closest to her. After her call within a call, her mystical union with Jesus that led to the founding of the Missionaries of Charity, that entire feeling of communion with the presence of Jesus disappeared. Now, from the writings of spiritual masters such as St. John of the Cross, who wrote Dark Night of the Soul, we know that saints and mystics often go through periods of feeling abandoned by God. Their blissful consolations of intimate communion with God suddenly vanish, and they no longer feel God's presence. Is God still there? Have I been abandoned? The challenge during the dark night of the soul is to remain faithful despite that desolation, to love God for the sake of God and not for any inner reward. Spiritual life in this condition feels arid, cold, empty. And Mother Teresa poured out her painful longing in confidential letters to her spiritual directors, writing this: "Within me, everything is icy cold. It is only that blind faith that carries me through. This terrible sense of loss, this untold darkness, this loneliness, this continual longing for God. It gives me that pain deep down in my heart. I just long and long for God. And then it is that I feel He does not want me. He is not there. This torture and pain I cannot explain. Mother Teresa, for the first 11 years of this inner darkness, felt bewildered and lost. Had God rejected her? But through her own intuition and the guidance of her spiritual directors, she came to see a greater purpose to her suffering, and she was able to embrace her anguish when she saw it as a way to share in the suffering of the poor. As she wrote, "I've come to love the darkness, for I believe now that it is a part, a very, very small part of Jesus' own darkness and pain on earth. This is the spiritual side of my work." Her private struggles were published by the church after her death, and they caused a major stir. A close friend of mine called me in an upset when she came across the writings. She said, "Fran, she was a fraud. Mother Teresa didn't even believe in God." Well, my friend's response was not unusual. Critics of Mother Teresa wasted no time in calling her an atheist, a hypocrite. Yet believers found the revelation of her inner struggles to be another confirmation of her sainthood. Indeed, the totality and authenticity of her surrender is obvious in her writings. For example, this one that's in the exhibit of her life, it's a handwritten letter to Jesus in 1959. "Don't mind my feelings. Don't mind even my pain. If my separation from you brings others to you, and in their love and company you find pleasure, why, my dear Jesus, I am willing to suffer with all my heart, to suffer all that I suffer, not only now, but for all eternity, if this is possible. Your happiness is all that I want. For the rest, please do not take the trouble. Even if you see me faint with pain, all of this is my will. I want to satiate your thirst with every single drop of blood that you can find in me. Don't allow me to do you wrong in any way. Take from me the power of hurting you. Heart and soul, I will work for the sisters, because they are yours, each and every one. They are yours. I beg of you only one thing. Please do not take the trouble to return soon. I am ready to wait for you for all eternity. Your little one." Who among us can understand this level of surrender, so utterly selfless? When I asked my teacher about it, and my teacher was a mystic, he knew of such things, he told me, people think that over a certain level of consciousness, you don't have inner questions. But on the contrary, now your inner questions are on a different level of comprehension. Your questions are expressed at the level that you are, and Mother Teresa was questioning things at a very high level. What she meant at her level is not the same as what others think she meant, reading it from their level of consciousness. Mother Teresa initially experienced Jesus Christ as a presence, a literal presence, and when that miraculous occurrence was not permanent, she felt abandoned and longed for the return of that presence. Her faith survived despite the loss of the feeling of the presence, and she offered her suffering for the propitiation of sins of herself and others. The full meaning of her experience is knowable only to God. And now here is the most shocking fact about all of her inner suffering. No one who lived with her knew about it. I asked Sister C, who lived with her, "Sister C, did you or any of the sisters know that Mother Teresa suffered like this?" And she said, "No, she never told us anything. None of us knew about it." So even those closest to Mother Teresa had no hint of her affliction. In Catholic tradition, a hallmark of sainthood is consciously to accept one's suffering in silence and bear it with ardent love as a gift to God for the benefit of others. This means that saints forego the usual human comfort of complaining or telling others what they're going through. When you think about it, a gift is no longer a gift when it's been unwrapped with others. So Mother Teresa taught her nuns that when born in secret between them and God, their suffering was transformed into a gift of love, given only to God. Out of her peerless and saintly love, Mother Teresa kept her suffering to herself so that it could be an offering to the beloved for her beloved poor. The Mother Teresa of Calcutta Center gives this compelling summary of her interior agony. It led Mother Teresa to an ever more profound union with God. Through the darkness, she mystically participated in the thirst of Jesus, in his painful and burning longing for love, and she shared in the interior desolation of the poor. Father Brian, a missionary of charity, directs the Mother Teresa Center in Tijuana, and he has done much to evolve an understanding of the anguish she endured. I met Father Brian when I was there in Tijuana in 2015. I was invited by Sister C. Father Brian was associated with Mother Teresa from 1977 until her death in 1997, and the church gave him the task to edit her private writings for publication. He had to assess thousands of testimonies about her impact and about her intercessions, and he served as the postulator for her cause of canonization to sainthood. His book, Come Be My Light, is where Mother Teresa's private letters are published. Father Brian views her inner darkness not so much as a dark night of the soul in that classical sense of spiritual purification. He views it as apostolic darkness, and that it helped her transmit God's love and increase her solidarity with the poor. Learning about love in a college classroom. I've been teaching Mother Teresa to college students since 2005. When they hear that Mother Teresa gave her life in service to others while going through decades of inner suffering and never complaining, they're dumbfounded. These college students are in my compassion course. By the time we get to Mother Teresa, they have finished a month-long take-home exam that requires them to probe their inner motivations for service. Their realization goes something like this, and I'm quoting from one of them. I never realized how much I do things for others out of wanting something in return. Approval, friendship, feeling good about myself. or at least a thank you. Even with family members and those I care about, I want something back. So I see that my love is not freely given. And then the people I don't even know, like strangers who are sick, mutilated, and dying, oh, I'm a long way from that kind of selflessness. Well, Mother Teresa's faith in the midst of darkness gave hope to one student named Amelia, who was going through a personal crisis. Amelia wrote this: "Reflecting on Mother Teresa's life gives me hope in the dark moments. Even if everything feels purposeless and empty and painful, there's still good that I can do every day. Even if it's just smiling at someone I pass on the street, or eating a meal with a friend, or walking my dog. I can do good every day. I can have a smidge of faith that maybe I can have more faith tomorrow." So I see that few students begin this compassion course excited to study a Catholic saint. But Mother Teresa is the one who wins their hearts through her purity of motive and her practical spirituality. In one of their applied inquiry homework assignments, students are asked to try to complete a contemplative exercise that's based on Mother Teresa's teaching. It goes like this: for one day, 24 hours, see Christ in his distressing disguise inside every person that you encounter or observe. That is, look for that person's innate goodness, their innate lovability, no matter what their physical or emotional condition is. That's the assignment. Students say this simple instruction changes how they interact with people. They come to see that everyone longs to be loved and is lovable. They take more time to listen. They are more giving, patient, and accepting of others. Instead of looking down on people, they look into them. When the students try Mother Teresa's methods in their community service sites, they practice cheerful smiling, compassionate touch, and doing small things with great love. Here's an example. This is from Sydney. I served with suicidal youth at a safe house for homeless teenagers. Mother Teresa taught me that the greatest disease is loneliness and feeling unwanted. Among these teenagers, loneliness is one of the largest risk factors for suicide. They feel like no one is going to miss them. I always tried to smile, just like Mother Teresa taught us, and it was amazing how this small change lightened the atmosphere. When I smiled, others smiled back. And often I was assigned to do office work, which was really boring. But when I saw it as doing small things with great love, like Mother Teresa said, even this became very meaningful. And here's from another student, named Sydney also. I served a woman dying in hospice who was unable to talk. She had Alzheimer's. Every time I came into her room, I was smiling. And then she would get this big smile on her face. And when I held her hand, she squeezed tight and didn't want to let go. I learned from Mother Teresa to smile because everyone has their own pain. And by smiling and touching her, I was letting her know that someone cares about her. I gave my love wholeheartedly to this woman, And I got to be the one person at that moment who really loved her. And it wasn't based on anything external. We knew nothing about each other's lives. So I learned that loving doesn't require us to know somebody. It just asks us to reach out. And here's something from Alexis. Mother Teresa knew the importance of person-to-person contact, and we saw in the Mother Teresa film that she wasn't afraid to hold the sick and the frail, to love them through touching them. I took this idea with me to the children's hospital, where the babies were surrounded by wires and tubes, and many of them were unable to move or to speak. At first, to be honest, I was scared of holding one of the babies or even getting near them. But I learned from Mother Teresa not to be afraid to love. And once I began touching and holding these babies, it was the joy of loving, just as Mother Teresa said. And this one from Claire. I served at a group home for boys between 7 and 13 years old. A majority of them have brain damage from prenatal substance abuse. They were born addicted to drugs. Some are mentally ill. They are in limbo between foster homes or waiting for their parents to take court-mandated action to become better parents. These boys feel abandoned. They crave love and affection. Every day, I tried to practice Mother Teresa's methods of doing small things with great love and also compassionate touch. Mother Teresa said, "It's not what we do, but how much love we put into it." And that's what I focused on. Every little act of kindness made an impact. A hug, smile, laughter, homework tip, a listening ear. I knew I couldn't fix their situation, but I could love them in that moment. And this is from Catherine. Mother Teresa did not let her internal struggle prevent her from making the world a better place. This makes me realize how our internal struggles do not have to determine our actions. In my volunteering in juvenile hall, sometimes I felt worried I wasn't capable for a certain task. I saw myself in a negative light. However, then I remembered that Mother Teresa dealt with incredible internal struggles too. And I reminded myself that in each situation, I do have the ability to choose love and to help others rather than solely focus on my own problems. Well, I had wanted to take these students from the compassion class to visit the Missionaries of Charity in Tijuana. This would have been part of our study of Mother Teresa, but the university deemed it too dangerous for a college field trip. The Missionary of Charity sisters, they serve there in Tijuana smilingly. They go where others fear to tread. They go into places of poverty, insanity, disease, refuse, starvation, despair, and even civil war and bombing. This fact is undeniable when we watch the documentary film called Mother Teresa, made in 1986, produced and directed by Anne and Jeanette Petrie. This film is singular in its inspirational impact. It shows 5 years' worth of Mother Teresa unstoppably doing relief work in 10 countries on 4 different continents. In the film, we see her works of compassion and how they transcend political and religious barriers. For example, she rescues Muslim children from a bombed-out area in the midst of Beirut's civil war. She talks about Americans and our terrible hunger for love at her commencement address at Harvard University. She gives relief to earthquake victims in Guatemala. This film shows her unflinching commitment to her calling, and sometimes, and somewhat humorously, the film shows it in contrast to that of other Catholic leaders. For example, in Beirut during the Civil War, civic and religious authorities tried really hard to dissuade Mother Teresa from entering the gunfire to rescue the crippled Muslim Arab children. But she was undeterred. She told them she was going to pray for Mother Mary to bring a ceasefire. And she specified the day and the time the ceasefire would happen. And it occurred just as she said it would, and this allowed her to cross the battle line and rescue the children from the bombed-out shelter. In San Francisco, when a Catholic bishop was so proud to hand over to her a newly renovated building, she and her sisters immediately started to remove all the carpet, the mattresses, the washing machines, the pews, the piano, and the water heater. The priest in charge is heard to say in the film, quote, "All of a sudden, the vow they took of poverty and the vow I took of poverty began to impress itself upon my mind. Theirs is far more than mine." In the film, Mother Teresa explains, it's normal to want such amenities, but we, as missionaries of charity, have taken a vow to serve the poorest of the poor, and so we live as the poorest of the poor live. Now, such a film might sound boring, following a saint through slums and rubble, but actually it's spellbinding, even to the college students who are a younger generation and have only an 8-minute attention span. I have witnessed the potent effect on the college students for 15 years when we watch this film. As it comes to an end, the room is silent, and the students are silent, as if in a meditative state. Afterwards, they share how different they feel. They say things like, "I feel hope for the world. Even my body is calmer. My anxiety is gone. I see how powerful just simple loving can be." In one recent case, a student's migraine headache went away. The response reported by my students matches the study conducted by Harvard Medical School professor Dr. David McClellan. He discovered through a saliva test that students who watched this film about Mother Teresa experienced enhanced levels of immunoglobulin A, which is the body's first order of defense against flu and cold. Dr. McClellan named this life-enhancing impact the Mother Teresa effect. Unconditional love benefits not only our spiritual lives, but also our physical health. Princess Diana and Mother Teresa. The film astonishes viewers with scenes of Mother Teresa and her sisters stroking and embracing the bodies of those who are diseased, spastic, starved, and mutilated. The only other image of human touch of the so-called untouchables in the 1980s that seared into the collective psyche was of Princess Diana touching, without gloves, those suffering from AIDS and leprosy. These two women, Princess Diana and Mother Teresa, revolutionized the world's view of these diseases. They broke the barrier of stigma and isolation by openly loving those suffering from leprosy and AIDS. 2 years after Mother Teresa established the first hospice home for people dying of AIDS in the U.S., Princess Diana opened Britain's first hospital unit at London Middlesex Hospital for patients infected with HIV/AIDS. The story of their friendship reveals that the power of love is expressed as effectively in the streets as from palaces. For Mother Teresa, location or vocation did not matter. What mattered was to surrender to the place God puts us, whether in the streets or in a palace. Here's what she said. Total surrender. To be where God wants you to be. If God puts you in the street and everything is taken from you, suddenly you find yourself in the street. It is to accept to be in the street at that moment, but not for you to put yourself in the street, but for you to accept to be there. This is quite different. And to accept if God wants you to be in a palace. All right, to accept to be in a palace as long as you are not putting yourself in the palace. This is the difference in total surrender. End of quote. Princess Diana, in her elegance and her high heels, physically towered over Mother Teresa, but she was a spiritual student of Mother Teresa. Princess Diana wrote that her encounter with Mother Teresa and the Missionaries of Charity in 1992 gave her the direction she'd been searching for during troubled years of her marriage and her separation from Prince Charles. In her visit to the Mother House in Calcutta, Diana said she had an experience while kneeling with the nuns in prayer that made her spirit soar. She struggled to put into words the deep effect of the sisters' love, singing, and compassionate touch. Soon after she was with them, she flew to Rome to meet Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa had been too ill to travel to Calcutta. Diana was 30. Mother Teresa was 80. She told Diana, in times of personal pain, reach out to others who are suffering, and they will then reach out in return. In June 1997, they had their last in-person meeting. It was at Mother Teresa's home in Bronx, New York. Mother Teresa's doctors warned her not to make that trip to the United States, but she insisted on going. She was in a wheelchair and very frail, but she gave herself to others without complaint. Princess Diana was in New York for a charity event. And here's a first-hand account of their last meeting. The convent phone rang, and a woman said, Princess Diana would like to see Mother. Mother was quite sick and was sitting at the top of the steps in a wheelchair. When she heard Diana downstairs, she jumped up and went down to greet her. They went into the chapel. Diana got down on the floor and prayed for Mother. Before Diana left, Mother gave her the Gift of Love music album by Bradley James. They walked outside together, and lots of people were gathered on the street. Afterward, Mother told us, now we must go to the chapel and pray for Diana. She has a terrible suffering. And so we did the Holy Hour Adoration for Princess Diana. End of quote. Within 12 weeks of this final meeting, both Mother Teresa and Princess Diana were gone. When Diana was killed in a car accident on August 31st, 1997, Mother Teresa sent condolences. She noted that their closeness was due to Diana's genuine concern for the poor and the unwanted. Diana was only 36. She was buried holding a rosary that Mother Teresa had given her. Just a few days later, on September 5th, in Calcutta, Mother Teresa passed away. She was surrounded by the prayers of her beloved Missionaries of Charity. When her breathing became labored, they called for a breathing machine but couldn't start it because the electricity went out. The entire mother house was in darkness. Quite like a saint to slip out of the world under the cover of darkness when everyone's attention was riveted on the tragic loss of an iconic Princess Diana. Mother promised her nuns that she would be available to an even greater degree after her death. The miraculous medal. The power of love is available to everyone who asks, but few are those who ask. This was the message of Virgin Mary in her apparition to St. Catherine Laboure, who was a novice nun at the Chapelle Notre-Dame de la Medal Miraculeuse in Paris, France in 1830. In this apparition, the Virgin Mary's hands extended toward the earth as she stood victorious upon its globe, and her foot was planted on the head of a serpent. Grace in the form of exquisite light emanated in rays from her fingers, but not from all of them. In this vision, she explained to St. Catherine that the absent rays represented the grace that God offers, but that we refuse. Her parting message to the saint was that a medal be cast and distributed with a depiction of the Immaculate Conception on the front of it and a tableau of Calvary on the back of it. And this became the famous miraculous medal. Mother Teresa loved the miraculous medal. She gave it as a gift of love to everyone she encountered. Advanced spiritual beings, such as Mother Teresa, often give a small object that carries their energy. In India, for example, His Holiness the 17th Karmapa gives a red string to all visitors. Such objects are a channel of grace, and they remind devotees that they belong to a spiritual path. The miraculous medal became the means by which Mother Teresa touched millions of people throughout the world, and still does. While she was alive, she handed the medal to countless people, especially the poor. One of the nuns who worked with Mother Teresa told me that Mother was always full of plenty of these medals. She instructed her nuns never to visit the poor empty-handed, always to have some of these medals. Mother Teresa kissed the miraculous medal, and she would press it into the hands of the poor and the suffering. She would ask them, "Where are you hurting?" And then she would press that medal gently on the pained area, and she prayed to the Virgin Mary to please kiss that very place. 3 months before Mother died, during her last visit to the South Bronx, she sat in a wheelchair and she cradled a basket full of the medals on her lap. As the basket emptied, the nuns refilled it. Mother Teresa kissed a handful of the medals and gave them to each priest as they lined up to greet her after the Mass. At this very same moment in June 1997, it happens that I was in Paris, standing in the very chapel where the vision of the miraculous medal had taken place. I had no idea the vision or the medal or Mother Teresa's use of it. I was in my early 30s, a young professor stuck in a soulless life. Nothing interested me in Paris except to walk around the corner from our hotel and slip into that little chapel where the Virgin Mary stood radiantly atop the globe, her foot crushing the serpent, her hands extended outward, those rays of light emanating from her fingers. My soul had been drawn there. I went every day. I stayed as long as I could, kneeling and asking for help. Within 2 months of those prayers in Paris, love miraculously came into my life. It unraveled much of what I believed. Perhaps that's why people don't ask for heavenly help. Love undoes who we think we are. Many, many years later, in 2013, I was given a miraculous medal when I knelt at Mother Teresa's tomb in Calcutta. To this day, I wear it around my neck. It reminds me to be a carrier of love wherever I am, facing whatever task is in front of me. As Mother Teresa tells us, where God has put you, that is your vocation. Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love.